Health and wellness are more than a destination. They are a process and a journey of personal choice. Come hear from people out in the field, doing the work, bringing health and wellness to many. So welcome everyone today. I have a lovely guest, Gail Lynn, and she is an author. She calls herself a rebel and a dreamer and an author. I love that. And of course, an inventor, which we're going to get into. So I want to start by just asking a little bit about how your story unfolded.
Do we start at birth? do we start at a previous life, right?
Oh, that's funny.
We'll start on this earth plane at this lifetime.
Great.
I feel like there's no accidents who we choose to be our parents. Yeah. So, I chose my mom, who has taught me so much about finances and accounting and very detail oriented. And I chose my dad, who taught me about how to fix anything. And he used to say, pay attention to how it comes apart because it's going to go back together the same way. He would fix all the neighbors' bicycles, lawnmowers, vacuums. And there was no accident that I grew up in automotive in Michigan. So all those things I think when I look back on my life and I take all those little puzzle pieces, it is so hilarious to me how the universe works and how the universe sets you up for what your path is. And some people never figure it out. Some people don't listen and they go off on different rabbit trails or tangents and they never find their path, which I think is so very sad. But yeah, I feel like I've been listening. I'm a Scorpio, so I'm very intuitive. And I feel like it was so perfect how the universe set me up with engineering to begin with. So then engineering the egg. And then working, and I had to overcome a lot of obstacles because when you grow up in automotive in the late 80s, early 90s, it's kind of a man's world. So when I first came out with the egg invention, in my head was like, women don't invent things. It was weird how that came out of some crazy subconscious thought process. And I had so many amazing friends. They're like, yes, you're an inventor. You're a woman. It's okay. So then, I kind of go into automotive, or I leave automotive, go into telecom and start working in international business and not knowing I was going to be in international business later on. Then, married a shaman and learned so many things about spirituality and also mental illness because he had a mental illness. So a genius type person, but you either loved him or hated him because he was so genius that he was almost no common sense, those. So deal with different types of people. Then I end up in Hollywood and just different career paths thinking, okay, now I'm being interviewed and doing, documentaries. And it's so fun to realize how the universe set me up. And I remember even being born and I remember the spirits there in the hospital room, just kind of rubbing their hands together going, she's here. So crazy.
It is crazy. Our stories. That's beautiful. I want to say, I also lived in we called it when I was a little girl, the Mitten. So Michigan. And I lived in Saginaw.
Yeah.
My dad was in Dow Chemical. And that's another story. So when you say set up and I look at my background in pharmacy, that's so funny. But I think it's great. So you were more near Detroit, I assume.
Yes, near Detroit. Right. My dad was an automotive worker. My mom worked in the automotive industry for a little while. My brother still works in the automotive industry. Wonderful. And after those 27 years in that environment, I knew that I needed to be more worldly. I needed to explore. I had to leave.
You have quite a story. So you have this engineering background, then you went to Hollywood. So you had a whole nother experience with that world, which we know what that's like. And then, yeah, but that's also interesting. And that helps you also understand some depth of people, right? What people will do when they want to make it there also. But here you are on your journey, and I know that you had a challenge, a health challenge. So often we have something. I know because I'm a nurse that happens to us. And that's like a big change moment. Can you share with us about that for you?
Well, absolutely. I think Western medicine failed me, and a lot of people feel that way. And for me, it was difficult. It wasn't like I had a broken bone and they could say, "Oh, you have a broken bone." I had migraine headaches for 23 years, and they started when I was 17. And I actually worked in a doctor's office and saw the operations and saw some of the corruption, if you will, in how people abuse the system. So tried to find a cure for my migraine headaches for 23 years, after blood testing and, all kinds of different testing that they can do. Migraines are a funny animal. It could be parasites. It could be an imbalance in your autonomic nervous system, which they will label as dysautonomia, which you can dump a bunch of different illnesses into dysautonomia, which is just an imbalance in the nervous system. It could be heavy metals in the body. Working in automotive, I had finally later on discovered, had a lot of cadmium and thallium. I worked with soldering and building and DC motors, so winding armatures, working with a lot of metal. And so you never know, it could be a viral load. I had strep throat a lot as a child. And I think antibiotics have such a large particle size that they don't really systemically get to kill off these viruses. So they break them up into smaller pieces, and later on they mutate into maybe a Lyme disease or an Epstein-Barr virus. So, you look at all the different things that could be a migraine headache, could be the foods that you're eating. So it would be really hard for Western medicine to say for any specific person, this is why you, Gail Lynn, get migraine headaches. So I had to go on my own journey to figure that out. And as a nurse, it's so difficult, and it's so hard when I started working with clients because they want answers. And it's so hard when you can't say, this is the answer. And they get frustrated. And then we created this autoimmune that says, your body's attacking itself. So then we feel betrayed by our bodies. And it's just so sad, the Western medicine education. So we kind of have to educate ourselves, because who knows our body better than us?
Yeah.
So we have to now empower ourselves. So I empowered myself to say, okay, what will work? And when I got the diagnosis of severe cardiovascular stress, and they said on the verge of an instant heart attack at 37 years old,
that's amazing.
I know I had been blowing and going. I don't know if that's a term that you use, but blowing and going for years and years and years. I mean, something's got to give, right? So I was sitting in a C-level conference. And so all C-level executives, CEOs, I was the COO of the production company in Hollywood. And I'm sitting there, and a guy comes onto the stage, and he's talking about sound and light therapy in this light box, this rectangular box. And he said, there's this little boy, and he shows a picture of the little boy on the screen. And he said he's had, 27, brain surgery since he was born, and he was so young. And when you looked at the eyes of this child, there was nothing behind the eyes. The eyes are the windows to the soul. And there was nothing, just glazed over. Well, then he starts progressing and saying, this is the boy now after doing so many sessions in this light box. And you could see a soul almost behind the eyes. And he said that the mother was such a brilliant angel. And she said, no one's going to put limitations on my son. No one gets to put an expiration date on my son. Nobody gets to tell me what my son can and can't do. And they said, the doctor said, he'll never grow hair. He'll never have teeth. So that the presentation progresses. They said he'll never walk. And you see this little boy with hair and teeth. And I'm just, at this presentation going, what is this thing, this magical box? And at the end of the presentation, a little boy comes out on stage walking with arm crutches. And I just lost it. I mean, I'm tearing up now just thinking about it. And this was early 2000s, right? So I said, well, if that light box can do all that, why can't it get rid of my migraines? That's simple.
Yeah.
So I bullied my way up to the stage like I do as a Scorpio, And I spoke to the man and I said, can this help with migraine headaches? Well, now I know the answer was the body doesn't know disease by name. Well, in my corporate brain, I thought, well, that was just a stupid answer. I wanted a yes or no answer. You can't really do that with our FDA and then, the TGAs and the different, associations that are medical. So his answer was perfect, but I still thought I'd give it a chance. And I flew to Arizona to do some sessions. It was just a weekend of sessions, and immediately my heart rate variability test had balanced. So the severe cardiac stress was gone. And I saw over time, my migraine headaches were less often. They were less intense. My eyesight improved only with a weekend of sessions. So my engineering mind couldn't really fit this into my box that this is crazy. It's sound, it's light. We just lay in this box and there was a little rainbow colored light bulb you could read. So Sylvania 40 watt. I'm like, this can't work. This is crazy. Yeah. So that's how I got introduced to sound and light. And because of what I saw it could do, I dove into the research. I'm a private investigator by nature, a researcher, like a weaver of information. So if you take sound, if you take light, if you take the body and the anatomy of the body and you figure out all these pieces, why did it work? And that's what I've been working on for the last, since that was 2007. So a lot of years.
That is a beautiful story. So this is really how you got introduced to energy medicine, is what I call it. What we don't see with our eyes. I can feel it because I do help people heal. I mean, literally what's happening now on the planet with the change that's occurring is so profound, because more and more we can feel more and more, actually, even through dimensional. It's quite something. But the point is that energy medicine has existed for a long time, but it has been by mainstream medicine not really taken up until recent years. So there was a real, they just didn't understand. It wasn't in their it wasn't in their box. And I come from mainstream medicine. And believe me, it's so busy. As a nurse and a doctor, my whole family are doctors. There's no time. They're just in a paradigm of this is what you do, and they memorize it, and there's not a lot of space for a lot of things, particularly when you talk about energy, because not everyone is even assuming that we are just energy, right? We have to first agree to that, and then we can start to understand. But anyway, you have invented the harmonic egg, which is a beautiful, I can show a picture here as I can know it works. And we're going to see that. And I live in the Netherlands, and we're going to go visit one of your eggs. So I want to first delve into your book. The title of your book is Unlocking the Ancient Secrets of Healing, Why Science is Looking to the Past for the Future. So can you explain a little bit why you titled like that?
Yeah, because so many people are is it science? And, and what is science? So that's my question, is what is science? To me, science is the pursuit of knowledge. It's understanding the natural world, and it's evidence-based. It is not a store-bought or an investor-bought educated guess that is a quick and dirty study. So many doctors have challenged me, and they said, have you done any controlled studies with the harmonic egg? And what is science? If it's the pursuit of knowledge, I'm pursuing the knowledge of what we are. We are sound and light beings by nature. I'm looking at the natural world. I have lilies blooming in my basement right now for Easter, and there's, 6 petals on that, and we'll talk about the 3 6s and 9s later. But, I'm pursuing the knowledge. I'm trying to understand the natural world, and I'm trying to base this on evidence and testimonials. But a controlled study to me would be, you would take 100 women or men. They have the same parents, grew up in the same house, on the same street, over years had the same job, the same boss, ate the same foods, So science to me is not, I'm going to take 60 people, 18 to 40 years old, and then I'm going to test a drug and I'm going to say that's safe. And then I'm going to give it to a 60-year-old and a 12-year-old. That is not science to me. So, we need to get back to, what is the definition of science? And so I thought it would be a catchy title to say science in an energy medicine book. So it was kind of a little bit of a tricky thing that I put out there to kind of get people's attention.
Yeah, I understand. And when we look to the past, it's kind of like we're looking to some knowledge that we have had and we've lost. That's sort of what I was thinking that you were thinking, that
Yeah.
we need to find it again.
We did ancient Egypt, they used sound therapy. We know that. We know the Aborigines have used sound therapy for, some people say 40,000 years. The Tibetans, the Greeks, Hippocrates, and some of those characters that we know used color and emeralds and stones. And it was so important to them. They didn't have the drugs that we have now, and they lived longer.
Yeah. As a nurse, I've seen drugs do miracles, but I also have seen that we didn't help ourselves by becoming so attached to the drug that we didn't find out more and we didn't ask more. And that was something I could tell you because I'm a nurse and nurses always look more holistically. So can I hold
the nurses,
hand? Can I just, why are we pushing that? Right. I mean, you can push a drug, but we also need to, they're human. They need their hand held. They're afraid. There's a lot going on here. So I think when we look holistically, we see a lot more than one thing, one level. And you're right. So ancient, you're right. And also remember the Indians, they use like drums for healing, right? Healing ceremonies. I mean, we're also familiar. I feel very intuitive for this. I can understand.
Well, you say about the nurses too, I want to give you so much credit because nurses seem to be more, I don't want to use this word, but I'm going to, they seem less brainwashed by the system. And they do ask questions, but then they get shot down. And I've had so many wonderful nurses as friends and clients over the years that maybe that's their ego doesn't get involved. I don't know what it is, but the nurses have been so beautiful. And maybe a lot of nurses are more women or in touch with their divine feminine, so they have the better bedside manners. Maybe their education's a little bit different, but I've really noticed that nurses are just such beautiful souls. And you're right, the patient needs to be handheld. They are scared. They're living in fear. If they're sick, especially, they're scared. And we give them this pamphlet that you fold up 35 times. And if you unfold it, it folds, out into like a huge kitchen table kind of in 4-point font with all the side effects of what we've given them, and we don't educate them. And then my girlfriend was just in the hospital with pancreatitis. And after kind of researching what she's eating, her lifestyle is, she's on Xeljanz, and we looked it up. And of course, there's a side effect of pancreatitis, but she wasn't told this.
So what I once heard when I was learning about energy medicine myself, you might find this interesting, is that when a medicine pushes the body, it's all about frequency. So if you think about it, it pushes one part of the body to work, but when it does that, another part can go out of frequency. So that's interesting, isn't it? So as we learn more and more about what you're talking about, we're going to understand why the drugs worked and why they did have side effects. And as we're making this great, huge change, we're also lightening up. And what used to work on a materialistic level is not really working anymore for many people.
And they can't test every single kind of medication with every side. Everybody's different body types, and then they're on 5 different meds or 8 different meds. There's no way to test that. It'd be billions of different tests, and we would never be able to put it out to the marketplace if we actually tested it properly. And then you have the drugs like Xanax, who will deplete the melatonin from the body, and then they don't sleep, and then they put them on a sleep drug, and then that messes up their stomach, and Then there's calcium blockers and ACE inhibitors and, so many different things that we don't consider when we're trying to balance our beautiful vessel.
So I love your journey. And one of the things I loved was you meeting this Dr. Dominique Sorel. Is that how I say her name? Sorel. And she is the Dean of Faculty and Professor of Energy Medicine University, which is also sounds very interesting. And she deals with intuitive intelligence, developing that. Now, we all know we have senses, right? We see with our eyes, we see what we see and hear what we hear. But there is another phenomena which we're all developing, and that's to see without our eyes. And that's the sixth sense of intuition. And so she has helped you. Obviously, you took her courses. I'm curious about that. And about the two, you talk about in your book, two things she taught you. I'll let you explain them.
Well, and she's very peculiar, very particular, very almost, I guess I'm just going to go ahead and say she's not from this world. She's very amazing. So she's very much living in the non-local realm a lot of her life. And the non-local is not what's the 3D, it's the 5D world for the most part, if that's a better way to explain it. So when I first was introduced to her, she said, send me your name, in an email. And then she tuned into my energy to make sure that she would even be willing to teach me, because she doesn't want to teach somebody something and then they use it for the dark forces or for something, not good. She has so much integrity. So she teaches controlled remote viewing. And when I was introduced to remote viewing, it was with Joseph McMonigal at the Monroe Institute in Virginia. And I went there for a week in 1998, and he happened to be there as a speaker. And he was telling people you could take an envelope, put a location in an envelope, and have a remote viewer tell you that exact location, the longitude, the latitude. And I thought it was just as crazy as it being in that light box with the Sylvania 40-watt light bulb, right? Yeah. I'm like, these people are a little cuckoo. Yeah. So it blew my mind that he worked for the government. He was a remote viewer for the government. And then later on, if there was a missing child, he could tune in and say, okay, there's going to be a blue car that comes to this gas station at this location. The child's going to be in that vehicle, and was basically saving lives. I mean, what a crazy gift. But with all gifts, we have to use them. I think we all have the gifts, but it's a muscle. Yeah. So you can be as intuitive as you are, but if you don't use that muscle, that intuition muscle, you could lose it. So she taught me their controlled remote viewing. And then she also taught me what they call radiesthesia, which is a ancient Egyptian technique for the use of the pendulum. I never really resonated when somebody would take a pendulum that was crystal and they're spinning it around. You can tell they're spinning it around. Yeah. But somehow they're reading their own pendulum, but it just didn't resonate with me. The way she taught me was the use of the pendulum. It should be wood. The Egyptians used limestone, so a natural material that doesn't hold information or energy like crystals, because you really have to be an expert at clearing your crystal and not having that crystal hold information for the next client and getting the wrong information because it stored the information from the previous client or previous clients. So the pendulum being wood, a certain way to hold it, a certain intention that you hold it. It's a very in-depth process. So it was beautiful because in her teaching me this helped me to listen more to my guidance and really to tap more often into the non-local realm. But again, you've got to use that muscle. You've got to nurture it and you've got to pay attention. You can't be on your phone and you're texting and multitasking and expect to be tapped into the non-local realm. It doesn't work that way. You've got to be in silence. You've got to be present. You've got to be listening. And so it was such a beautiful meeting. We've stayed great friends ever since. She's helped me to pendulum many aspects of the harmonic egg and other technologies I'm going to be coming out with. because I want to make sure the first thing is it will do no harm. It will never hurt anybody. And are all the parts, bits and pieces exactly the way that they should be so that it's as magical as I want it to be.
Well, I think it's nice that you met her because, you say everything's for a reason. So sometimes we can't figure it out when we're going through it, but it was very important. And I understand these gifts because many of us have this ability to see. I used to, as a nurse, like I would just get information, go to room set 2. And then I knew that there was something serious in room 2. Well, how did I know that? I can't explain. I just was listening. So some of us develop this, or we have a certain innate ability to do this. But I believe all humanity is sort of going to go in this way. We're going to learn that there's more that we don't see than what we see. And that's the first thing. And then when we start to say, oh, there's more there than what we see with our eyes, and then we start to ask more questions, that's the humbleness in this is so beautiful. So
Yeah.
that's what a beautiful experience. So the harmonic egg was then developed with an idea of that we are energy, that we have light and we have sound. Obviously, we're speaking, and that through light and sound, which are frequencies, we can. Because I know most of what I understand about illness is that we have imbalance and blockages, right, that happen at the cell level all over, whether it's headaches or too much congestion here, or heart disease. We have a blocked electromagnetic field here. Whatever electromagnetic field or area of our body that is condensed and blocked, with light and sound, we can I in the kind of world that I see in the future, we can heal. So, and really release. So you understood this because you say the egg, you describe it as geometrically balanced, hollow, dodahedron, egg shaped. And so you really thought this thing out as an engineer. Can you explain that?
And yeah, a lot of it was intuition and downloads that came through. I feel like I was guided a lot by the autistic community. At one point, I had a dream where there were 2 autistic children, a girl a little older, and then a boy who was younger. He was nonverbal, she was verbal. And I was walking in a field full of bears, and I was scared. And they walked by with their horses, and she, the girl, told me to hop on the boy's horse and that I would be taken to safety. And so I feel like they've tapped in, and through Susie Miller, I've learned a lot about the nonverbal autistic community. She's the author of Awesomeism, and she works with the autistic community, and they are brilliant. So I feel like there's been so many different pieces of the puzzle that have come to me through intuition. And I feel like we are vibrational beings of light. We're sound and light. So why not heal with sound and light? Now you get into different frequencies and you get into different sacred geometric forms. So sacred geometry has been around for tens of thousands of years. And the structures that we see out there with sacred geometry a lot of them are still standing. So I felt like a lot of people have tuned into the frequencies of 528 hertz, heal the DNA. And, what if you're vibrating at 600 hertz? Do you really want to put yourself in 528 hertz? Does that bring your vibration down? So, I've started studying frequencies and the sound waves of instruments and how does each instrument work with the organs of the body. I think that's going to be a better way for sound and light to work with the body, different colors of light, different waveforms, instead of guessing at a frequency. And I learned a lot from tapping into the consciousness of Royal Rife, who was a brilliant scientist and physician practitioner. But what he used back in the 40s, 50s, as a frequency for, say, parasites aren't the same. They've mutated. So we now have a different frequency. So if we can get our body in balance, I think that our body can heal from anything. There's no limits And like the gentleman said to me, the body doesn't know disease by name. It's an imbalance. It's a blockage, energetically, emotionally, spiritually. It could even be scar tissue, where if somebody had a major surgery, scar tissue can block the energy flow, but our bodies can reroute our energy around that.
So, one of the things about the Rife machine that I know about is that you hold a device. And at the time that we were learning, we had a choice to go with antibiotics or this. But they thought about putting these machines everywhere and how complicated that would be. And it just seemed like antibiotics were easier. But that didn't mean that it was necessarily better. That's so interesting. But just like I believe we have parasites and we have all these things for a reason. They're not all bad. Like we have mostly bacteria, which are good for us. It's all about the balance, is what you're saying. And it's all about what I gathered from what you just said about frequency. It's all about the fact that we're all so unique. So we can't look at everybody just the same. And that's been one of the problems of medicine. We have one drug for everybody. This is not how it works. We all have very unique DNA. We all have very unique ways. That's what we're realizing also in health and wellness, that we don't heal the same way. If I gave you the same thing as someone else, you wouldn't heal. And you see what I mean? So can you explain a little bit about those thoughts when you made this egg?
Yes. So I feel like after working with a couple of different doctors who were medical doctors, but then kind of gave up their license, if you will, to do more energy medicine. Norm Shealy is one of them. Raphael D'Angelo is another one here in Colorado. He's a parasitologist now. And they all realize this, throughout their career that, there is no one size fits all. But with the resonance of the egg, what Dr. D'Angelo was explaining to me, he says, what's happening in the egg, somebody's in the egg and they have Lyme disease. So they're giving off a frequency of, say, Lyme disease. He said, what's happening in the egg? And he goes, and I can't explain how or why, but the sacred geometry part of it and everything that you've created is hitting that Lyme disease with an exact opposite frequency to neutralize it from the cellular memory. And so it took me a long time to really study that, but we can neutralize things. And some meds, like, they neutralize, or maybe they're just inhibiting something else from happening. But why not use our natural energy to do that? So using Tesla's mathematics and using the natural world of 3, 6, and 9, and you look at so much in nature is 3, 6, or 9. Like I mentioned earlier, the lily has 6 petals on it that bloom today. And I chuckle every day when I look at, I'm growing some alfalfa for my horse and it's coming up looking like 3-leaf clovers. And I'm like, well, why do people look for a 4-leaf clover? Because the 3 is the magic. So we look at all of nature and you see a lot of 3s, 6s, and 9s. Even when I was younger and I played softball for 30 some years, my number was number 3. If I couldn't get 3, I wanted 33. So, and I didn't know why. I didn't know why at all. And so it was just very comical. So when I looked at the egg, I thought, I want to use the 3, 6s, and 9s. I want to tune into Edgar Casey's consciousness and say, he talked about sound and light, combining sound and light. There's a lot of light therapy glasses. There's vibration, sound beds. But I wanted to create it where it was enclosed with sound, with light, in a resonant chamber, so that the body could be that. I want to say this is a weird way I explain it. It's that you're enclosed in that 360 immersion of the sound and the light and the vibration. And there's like a sonic massage going on for the cells. And if your body's giving off something, and in that resonance, it can hit it with an exact opposite charge, frequency, waveform, and neutralize it. Yeah. I have had some of the best success, and we can't make any claims, as you know, but oh my gosh, when people are coming out and saying what they're saying, I am just blown away.
Yeah. So there's a lot we don't understand, but it really, the idea that you just described reminds me of classical homeopathy, because they give the exact, they do that. They listen to what's happening and they say, oh, there's an imbalance because you're showing the symptom, but they're not going to treat the symptom. They're going to treat the whole thing, the whole. And then they give the remedy, which is to neutralize. And
Right.
so they give, and that's very interesting. So I find it
And
fascinating.
homeopathy has been around for
Yes.
decades, if not, centuries or thousands of years. We don't really know.
Yeah.
And I feel like we have trashed the reputations of some of these plants. For example, each egg chooses a plant spirit. And the egg will tell you what that plant spirit is if you're listening. And the eggs are a living consciousness, a living technology, a living consciousness. And the Peru Center sent a note and said that their plant spirit for their egg that's coming is probably the cocoa plant. And immediately, one of my staff members said, well, that's what they make cocaine from. Well, that's what humans have done to this beautiful plant with so many healing properties,
Yeah.
just like we've done to marijuana. We grow it now under fake light inside. It doesn't have the fungi because it's not growing in the sunlight. Marijuana is different from when it was in the 70s and 60s or whenever. So we've taken some beautiful, beautiful things and we've bastardized them. Can I say that?
Well, it's the duality, right? Because we can do, like you said, with everything, the good intention but every intention matters. So a pure intention will bring out something in its pure form, and something that is not well intended, you can feel that if you tune into that. So I think what you're saying is very true. Okay, so that's beautiful how you explain that you go into this egg, you're hearing certain music or sounds, and it's bouncing off this egg dome, and you're sitting very comfortably, I know, in the middle because I've been in it, and you're also feeling the light is also there, the intensity of light, which we know. So all of this is happening, and it's with the idea that our cells have an electromagnetic field, and that if we're in balance, everything's in harmony and everything's flowing. And if we're not in balance, it's not. And so what is not will find its own balance. That's the idea of it. It's very beautiful. Now, you do talk about the autonomic nervous system, which is so overwhelmed. The stress on the planet right now is just so. Can you explain a little bit about what you've seen? This is important with trauma with it, because trauma and stress. Okay, trauma is a stress that somehow got stored in the body at the cell level, trapped, let's say. And, so let's hear, what have you experienced? Because I think that must be a big thing.
I think in the US, I don't know about the Netherlands, but they will tell you that stress is the number one killer, period. So if I've just created a relaxation device that de-stresses the body, then whoop, whoop, okay, we're good, right?
Yeah.
If you look at the autonomic nervous system, there aren't any drugs on the market that say we balance the autonomic nervous system. That is a very complicated mechanism of the body. And most people are stuck in fight or flight. So the saber-toothed tiger or the bear is always chasing them. They never have any rest. They're just running and running and running and running. Well, that prevents other parts of the system from working. So when we have done heart rate variabilities, well over 200 of them, and I had a doctor doing these, and I said, okay, if I had to give a refund to anybody who didn't see an improvement in their ANS and their heart rate variability after the session, how many refunds would I have to give? She said none. Some people have amazing improvement. Some people have slight improvement, depending how stuck they are and how open they are to flowing and relaxing. So that's kind of the claim to fame, which we can't make a claim, but rebooting the autonomic nervous system. And I remember being stuck in fight or flight since I was, a baby. And I remember the first time I realized that I had a parasympathetic and a sympathetic nervous system, which is combined the ANS, autonomic nervous system. I was speeding past a cop, and I remember this heat that came up from my belly all the way to my throat. And I was like, what is that? And I didn't get pulled over, and I could feel the heat go back down. And I said, oh my gosh, I just went into my sympathetic fight or flight,
Yeah.
didn't know that was the response, but then the saber-toothed tiger or the cop didn't pull me over. So that parasympathetic balanced back out with the sympathetic when the crisis was over and I didn't get pulled over.
Yeah.
And I think so many people live in the sympathetic and the fight or flight that they don't even know when they go into fight or flight because that's where they are all the time.
Yeah.
What is that doing to the body? That is creating so much disease, so much chaos. So I remember I used to work out all the time. I did circuit training, I did kickboxing, I did sparring, I did karate, and I was always going, going, going. Once my autonomic nervous system came into balance, I didn't go to the fitness center anymore. I didn't work out anymore. I still do my walking and my yoga, but I was more toned and muscular than I was while I was working out so intensely in fight or flight.
Yeah.
Weird, huh?
No, because I understand this. I had the same thing when I did yoga. I suddenly had a flat belly, and it was so weird because I would be in the middle of yin yoga, which you don't even move. And all of a sudden, from nowhere, I would start crying for nothing. And it was just because I was releasing from this one position all the blockages in my stomach that were so blocked, all the emotions. So no, it's totally, I think when we start to do things like that, we realize it's not one size fits all, and yin and yang need to be balanced. So if we're all yang, 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 we need a little more yin. And if we're a yin, 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 we need a little more yang. It's, probably the person who's meditating all day long might need a little kickboxing. It goes like that. But that's so true what you're saying. So what you see, so my point is that, as these people are going in to the egg, they must have these emotional releases or releases. Have you experienced that? I can only imagine this is what happens. I know your book.
So many people cry. So many people and even they don't even know why they're crying. Yeah. So sometimes, it's that the guy who will cry and he's like, what is this salty, wet substance that's coming out of my eye?
They're not used to it.
Just that little bit of tear too. And as a nurse, that the tears will help to lower cortisol because you're releasing through that. So I've had a lot of women who say that they have a slimmer belly or the belly fat's going away because they've cried and they've released whatever it was that cortisol was storing in the belly fat. Gosh, I could tell you so many stories about how many people have cried and they've relived past lives where they felt that the present was a result in some of their diseases and things as a result of the past life. So most of your audience probably knows Dolores Cannon. Her daughter is Julia Cannon, wrote a book, Soul Speak. It's a brilliant book if you want to read it. She talks about, and this is where I learned that my allergies and my asthma that I brought over in this lifetime could have been a direct result of my drowning in a previous life. So I used to have a reoccurring dream where I would fall underneath the ice. I couldn't find my way up and I would drown. And it was reoccurring for so many years when I was a child. After doing sound and light therapy, the dreams went away, the asthma went away. And I realized that my DNA didn't know the difference between that lifetime and this lifetime. So it just said, well, this is asthma. I mean, we have this trauma in the DNA and the cell memory. We'll just bring it over this way. So a lot of people have been releasing things from past lives, which they've brought over into the DNA in this current life. And it just blows my mind how many things we don't know about the body.
Yeah. And that's what we have to be humble about. That's beautiful. We just don't know a lot. We're really, the more we can go to that point, we can be open to new things, I think. I don't know how you feel, but I feel like that.
I'm taking a class next month. It's May. Yeah. I'm taking a class next month. There's a program in the UK and I think it's called ICU or something, but they put blindfolds on you and these kids are reading books with blindfold on. So I want to take the class. I might be too old to learn this. I hope I'm not.
I teach about these children, these new kids. Maybe
So
a
I
special
think,
gift.
I wanna learn the technique and see if I can get out of my left brain and get into my right brain and really, we all have fears. So one of my biggest fears is going blind. And I'm like, I don't want to manifest that. So I, try to push it out, but we rely so much on our eyes, but yet our eyes deceive us all the time.
We get stuck on one thing when we
Yeah,
see.
yeah, yeah. And so Wayne Dyer says, if you change the way you see things, the things you see will change. And he does this story and he's walking along the beach. And I don't know if it's California or New Jersey because it has two stories to it. Walking along the beach in New Jersey, these comes across these people and they say, hey, well, we just moved from California. The people were really nasty and mean and it was horrible and we hated it there. How are the people here? And he said, oh, they're the same. Because until they change the way they see things and how they experience other people, they'll just keep having the same experiences.
Yes. Yes. We really, that law of attraction is really hooked in with the law of vibration. So let's go talk about frequencies. So you talk about the 369 theory of Tesla. You also talk about sacred geometry. So it's sort of like the idea you wrote it in your book of when things are in pure fit, perfect resonance or harmony, everything is sort of beautiful. It's sort of like what we see with Emoto with the water, right? You see these beautiful patterns, and it's the same patterns we see in nature. And actually, it's how our cells should look, right? It's how things should be. So if we mirror with how if we mirror a perfect sound or a perfect pitch or something beautiful that vibrates so purely, then also our cells, I can imagine, will start resonating with that. Like there's something about frequency. Can you talk about that?
Oh, well, there's a lot of stuff. If you follow David Hawkins' work, Power versus Force, the I of the I, the EYE of the I, the letter I, he talks a lot about, low vibration frequencies, like 200 hertz is where you have anger and hate. And I think that's where we create disease is we hold that anger in our liver. And then all of a sudden we have liver disease. We hold the grief in our lungs and we have a lung disease. We hold fear in our kidneys. And so I think if we can raise our vibration, disease can't see that. Disease is down here and we're up here, singing and, rainbows and butterflies and unicorns. But at any given moment, you can go down to anger and maybe pick up a disease. But it's like, how fast can you get out of that anger and get back up to your high vibe? The more you do egg sessions, the more you do meditation, the more you focus on staying high vibe, the quicker you can bounce back to it. Some people get stuck. Somebody cuts me off in traffic. Of course I get mad and I, want to cuss them out, but I'm like, oh, and then I have to remember they're bringing down my vibe. I can't let that do that. So I'm like, okay, love you. Goodbye. So it's really hard, but there's so many different examples of, disease can be at such a low vibe. And I had a lady tell me one time, she's like, well, you'll never get a disease from anybody because you stay high vibe. I'm like, I'm not going to test that theory. I really feel like the egg energy brings you up. The sacred geometry is such a high vibration. I think the egg vibrates at about 1200 hertz now, just sitting. And so we're not going to play music in there that's 396 like the solfeggio suite. We're going to keep raising the vibration of the egg as the Mother Earth raises her vibration. And as the clients and the humans and humanity are raising their vibration, the egg has to keep changing.
One of the things I was thinking, so we create our lives, and quantum physics is telling us, when you write about it in your book, that there are waves and particles, and when we look at something, we make it a particle, and when we don't look at it, it goes back to be a wave. And this is how we are creating with the plasma and the unified field. And it's so beautiful. And I'm wondering, how does this work if somebody is very negative? They have negative thinking patterns. So how would the egg help someone like that?
So I believe that we develop these negative thinking patterns. A baby doesn't have a negative thinking pattern. A baby doesn't hate. A baby isn't angry. we get this through our experience with humans and our life experiences. So if the egg can go in and clear that from the cell memory and bring them back up to a place of more love and perfection and not hating, not being angry, and to be able to see the judgment that they have and the criticism that they have. Even my mother, when I was a child, she would see a beautiful person. Oh, look at that girl. Why was she wearing that? I got that from her, right? Yeah. And so now I can see a beautiful woman. I'm like, she's just beautiful. She is a beautiful woman. And I can see somebody and say, you have just beautiful eyes. I could never do that because the programming I got from my mother was like, I should hate this person because she's beautiful. And so, and these people live very miserable lives. My mom was very miserable and it was sad. And you don't have to live that way. You can reverse that programming. Just like I had a car accident, very bad car accident. I got hit broadside, 60 miles an hour. And what I learned from doctors, if you can get into a sound and light therapy type device, or if you know how to by yourself erase that trauma from the cell memory within 6 hours of an accident, it doesn't have time to hold in the cells. So the body doesn't even really know what happened because you erase it and the body doesn't even remember it. So I got over the car accident very quickly. Many people who have that type of accident have traumatic brain injuries for the rest of their lives. But I feel like I was able to erase it before my memory of my cell could program it into my body. So I have all these examples.
Stuck, right, Gail? It would get
it'll get stuck.
Yes,
it'll get stuck somewhere, and then it manifests into more and more and more. But if you look at it from a natural perspective too, this is just a story. I think this relates to what we're talking about, but rattlesnakes. So I have rattlesnakes on my property. And what I know about the Native Americans, the rattlesnakes don't bite Native Americans. The rattlesnakes bite white people. Why? Because we have trauma and we see a snake and we're like, kill it, kill it, kill it. Yeah. Well, if you're going to act that way, the snake's going to be like, bite that person. They want to kill me. But what if you can walk past that snake and say, I love you. You belong here just as much as I do. I'll leave you alone. You leave me alone. We are souls. We are connected. We are one. And so, I invite these creatures to come onto my property. I have some trees here, and apparently we have these things called voles. Never heard of them. They're like moles, but they chew the roots of trees. So I'm going to take a picture of a vole and a picture of my tree, put them in the egg together and say, you guys live in harmony together. And maybe it's just an intention that I set. Maybe it's just that I'm not going to spend time in the negative and say, oh, those voles are going to eat my trees, because then I think they will.
Yeah.
So I don't know, can I answer the question and try to give some examples of how people can live more in harmony with themselves and nature?
Yeah. And also how people can reprogram their thoughts themselves, but how just de-stressing and raising your frequency can perhaps bring you to another perspective. And it is all about perspective, right? The glasses that we choose to wear. And sometimes we don't even know we have a choice. So I think that's part of it also, realizing that we have a choice in how we're going to perceive what's happening.
There's free will, and we have a choice. We create our own reality. I think you can manifest anything you want, any kind of abundance. I've manifested this beautiful house on the land and manifested my horse living with me. I have an amazing life. I have zero wants or needs. Everything is just provided. And sometimes I don't even know how. It just is.
Yeah. I think as we start to tune in to the laws of nature, we start to that just starts to happen. We just start to be in harmony. Like you said, they can live together. We can live with them. Well, when we're working with the laws of nature, we're not going uphill. We're working with nature, and we are creators. So whatever is blocking us from being the creator is ourselves, right? This is in our own consciousness. Okay, I love what you wrote. You wrote the statement, all truth passes through 3 stages. This is true. First, it's ridiculed. Second, it's violently opposed. And then third is that it is finally accepted as self-evident. So we know this, right? I just love this because we know it in the world and we see it right now. It's so true. Even with our own kids, we try to teach them and we say them and they're like, no, you know how kids, no, mom, you're wrong. And then they find it the same thing a couple years later and they tell you as if they just learned it. So can you explain a little bit about this in your own life and what you see
Oh,
like for the world?
yeah.
This is
It's so beautiful. I think we plant seeds and some people try to plant the seed and get it to germinate immediately, and you're not going to do that. You got to, in passing, you just plant the seed. And like you said, especially a mother or a parent telling their kids, and their kids are like, my mom doesn't know anything. And then their friend's mom tells them, and then all of a sudden it's a new revelation, right? But you've planted the seed already, so it's germinating. In 2012, I got attacked pretty badly by our media, our Channel 4 media, where they called me a witch doctor, a scammer. Energy medicine was just phooey. It was ridiculed. It was totally opposed. And it's not that much, longer. 2012 wasn't that long ago. Now you see them talking about blue light, green light can help headaches, red
yeah.
light therapy. And it's like, oh my God, just a few years ago, they attacked the crap out of me, caused me to stay in fight or flight for 6 months. I was on a part 1 and a part 2 interview on the news, and they kept coming to my center and just, harassing the crap out of me. And so you see how, how quickly time is moving now. I mean, that's a short period of time to go from, embracing energy medicine to, violently opposing it.
That's amazing. And you know what's so beautiful about you? You just survived all that and you persevered very groundedly to now manifest this amazing, beautiful gift you give the world in 80 locations already. I think it's pretty remarkable. Wow, Gail, what a journey. I'm so I have to say my hat's off to you. Really, it's so cool. So my last question is really, well, to thank you very much for this interview, and I really hope that it gets all over the world, this interview, so that more and more people see your work and have hope, because we need more hope. We need more people to try some things new. There's not, like you said, this will do no harm, and if it makes a difference and it helps, it's amazing. So my last question to you today is, where do you see yourself and the world going?
Wow. You got another hour? Just kidding. Um, I think that we are on the right path. Bruce Lipton said, what happens between change where we got to go from here to here, but what happens in between is chaos. And are we not in chaos so much right now? I feel like we're going to come out of it. I see a beautiful world. I see in my visions, what I see is children playing in the streets again. I see parents being able to afford a home, not having to pay extravagant monies for rent and not have the American dream and work so hard that, 2-family income, and they can't afford a house. If you're working your butt off, you should be able to afford a house, a vacation once a year, to be able to enjoy your kids and your life. And people are not doing that right now. We have made it so hard for people because everybody's got their damn handout that doesn't deserve to have their handout, and they're taking from people all that they're working for. And they're just so it's so frustrating to watch this because they need to let these people have a savings account. When I was a kid, my parents had a savings account. We went on a vacation once a year. My dad worked an automotive assembly line job, which he hated, but it still afforded him that low income job to support 3 children, have a home, have a yard, have vacations, and enjoy some of his life. So it's just not fair. It's not fair what we've done to people. And so I feel like the world's going to be a much more beautiful place. I let things flow. I try to stay present in the moment because that's where the magic happens. And I do my weekly egg sessions. I think I will probably create a few more technologies as the world changes, as humans change, as our society changes, there'll be, I think, different systems in place for, hopefully, for home mortgages, for tax structures, because our mentality is going to change. So I really want to see us grow together and not apart. Like we're the United States of America here, but we're not. We're the divided states of America right now. We need to get back united with each other.
I think sometimes, I love how you said this. I think sometimes we get this feeling of separation, or we have to see the separation in order to realize that we're not separated. So I think what part of the chaos is to realize that we're actually united and we're the same. And when we have this in our heart, we go back to our heart, right? And we need to go to our heart to have this kind of compassion instead of I'm this and I'm that, or I'm this political party, and that's all separating. We need to come together as a community and say, how can we live a better life? And I think you've said it, and you've done something, created something for the world that is so beautiful. I just want to thank you. And wow, I'm just in tremendous appreciation of your perseverance and that you did this for the world. And hopefully, and I am sure in the near future, more and more people will understand this power of this, what you have created. Thank you so much, Gail.
Thank you so much for all your hard work. Thank you for being a nurse. Thank you for all that you are in service to people. I really admire you.